Heat rose through frost and the air listened. A sensor blinked once. Timestamp March 12, 2025. The plain of Jezero lay beneath thin dawn, light scattered across frost that had not yet melted. A wind moved over the crater rim and came to rest. Nothing seemed alive, yet something breathed. TGO in orbit and MEDA on the rover's deck waited for the same pulse. Each dawn, just before the frost broke, methane spiked and vanished. The gas climbed through thin ice and left no trace behind. For 1 minute, the red planet exhaled. The frost darkened, the shadow of the rover stretched long. A line of sun touched the instrument mast and stayed. Sensors read a slow rise in heat, a whisper of gas at the edge of silence. Data marked a heartbeat too faint for certainty. A mission log recorded the moment without comment. Pressure stable. Wind calm. Trace methane rising at dawn. A pattern that had returned after years of absence. The breath that forgot to die, found again. Beyond the crater rim, the horizon glowed with dust. The air thinned until it was only light and drift. Every motion seemed to come from below the ice, not above. Even the sound of frost breaking felt deliberate, almost patient. For a moment, the landscape looked like memory repeating itself. The same frame, the same faint shimmer of heat, history folding back into present data, an old question waking beneath a new sky. The recorders stayed quiet after transmission. The room at mission control stayed quiet too. No one spoke. The graph rose, flattened, and ended. Heat through frost. Silence through measure. The planet remained unchanged, but the air now carried story. And under the pale horizon of Jezero, the field remembered how to breathe. The rover adjusted its mast, recalibrated the sensors, and began another dawn cycle. Circuits hummed as data passed from deck to orbiter. The link between Jezero and orbit was steady, the rhythm of measurement exact. Methane at parts per billion, rising with first light, dropping again before the shadow line crossed the ridge. The array confirmed the pattern that the frost had hidden. The signal was small but sure. Pumps kept heat moving through thin pipes beneath the deck. Each vent opened, then sealed again. The machine exhaled and waited. The planet answered in molecules, not words. A table of values scrolled across the screen. The team compared infrared lines from the Trace Gas Orbiter and the local sensor. One set showed nothing. One set showed everything. The difference was timing the breath caught between frames. The frost cracked, a sound like pressure releasing. A faint mist rose and scattered into cold air. For a heartbeat, the field flickered. Then the numbers steadied again. Thermal inertia increased by 1.3%. Surface temperature reached -70 degrees. Pressure gradient shifted by 10 to the power of -3 pascals. All systems normal. Beneath the data, the mechanism continued its work. Gyros aligned, filters cleared, antennas leaned toward orbit, then corrected to the sun. The pattern repeated, clean and tireless. Each spark, each code, each checksum confirmed the rule. Nothing in the machine doubted what it saw, yet the figures refused to stay constant. Something beneath the frost moved too softly for metal to describe. The gas returned again the next morning, smaller, slower, but still alive. The frost learned the shape of heat. The air accepted the change. A quiet order spread through the field. Circuits balanced. The hum flattened to a low chord. The line between signal and silence thinned until it vanished. And in that narrowing, a pattern of patience appeared. A gentle covenant formed between frost and flames. The data reached the control room at dawn. A single spike appeared where silence had been. No one spoke for a moment. The graphs glowed pale blue across the screens, lines rising and falling like a slow breath. The console hummed and the room grew still. A soft click marked the next frame. Someone leaned closer to the monitor. Coffee cooled beside the graphs. Outside, morning light climbed over the building. The same frost that had broken on Mars touched the windows here. Heat rose from concrete instead of regolith, but the rhythm was identical, the quiet exchange between cold surface and patient air. The numbers turned into conversation. Methane concentration, thermal drift, wind speed, pressure stability. A system speaking in the same pattern every morning, as if remembering its own voice. We watched the replay again, each frame an act of returning, every error bar a small confession of doubt. The planet was learning how to exhale, and so were we. Someone adjusted the gain. A sleeve brushed the edge of the desk. The hum of the console filled the pause. A reflection trembled on the glass. On screen, the pulse of methane formed a low curve. No storm, no outburst, no chaos. Only measured heat rising through frost. It looked almost deliberate. There was something human in that restraint. It reminded us of breathing slowly when the air is thin, of standing on frozen ground and waiting for the sun to reach our hands. We remembered mornings by the lake in winter, the steam rising off water that refused to freeze. Each image from Jezero carried that same calm defiance. Not resistance, but continuation. Not noise, but rhythm. The kind of patience machines can record, but not explain. Lines became familiar, as though written by a steady hand long ago. The same shape appearing across years and missions. The same curve hidden inside different noise. A persistence we could almost mistake for memory. Hands rested on the metal frame of the desk. A notebook lay open beside the keyboard. The cursor blinked like a slow pulse. Shoes made a soft sound on the floor. Someone noted the new methane amplitude. Another wrote that the variation matched no known cycle. The words on screen were simple: heat, frost, return. 3 conditions repeating themselves without reason. For a moment, the data felt like weather. Not a code, not a mystery, just the planet's way of balancing its silence. Even here, light through the window carried the same pattern. We watched it shift across the wall, the same rhythm of release and rest. A hand adjusted the focus dial on the main feed. The image sharpened, then softened again. The surface shimmered like distant water. It could have been a memory of Earth, or Earth watching itself in red reflection. Breath slowed and steadied. We waited with it. The air seemed to listen. The hum of instruments became almost kind. Outside, the city woke one window at a time. Inside, the room kept its quiet orbit. Every number on screen was an answer wrapped in uncertainty. Yet, every doubt led back to the same pulse, the slow return of heat through frost. The planet had not spoken, but it had remembered how to sigh. The numbers agreed, but meaning did not. The data said absence, the pattern said return. One showed noise, the other showed breath. Heat under frost, silence inside motion. Methane that should vanish was alive again. A contradiction written in parts per billion. Was the planet exhaling, or was the instrument dreaming? If both were true, then truth itself bent around the frame. The graph became a mirror instead of a measure. Between certainty and wonder, we stood without balance. The law stayed clear, the field disobeyed gently. Fact and faith met in the same thin air. Each line argued for stillness, each curve for life. The paradox settled like dust after wind, not resolved, but resting. A quiet oath formed between knowing and doubt. The sky above Jezero did not choose. It only waited for the next dawn to begin again. At dawn the next day, the pattern returned. Methane again, small but sure. The same breath, the same hour, the same faint rise before light. Data from orbit and from ground aligned within 1 part per billion. Coincidence began to look like design. It was not that Mars was alive in the way Earth is alive. It was that silence itself had structure. The frost and the gas had learned a rhythm older than weather. Every system, when left alone long enough, finds its pulse again. The sun touched Jezero with a thin blade of heat. The frost softened, turned translucent, and let go. Gas lifted from beneath, slow and invisible. For 1 minute, balance replaced motion. Across the control room, graphs traced the return. The signal rose at the same time each morning, the same slope, the same fade into quiet. The measure taught us to listen rather than seek. The dataset echo came from 2 instruments thousands of kilometers apart. Both read the same spike within seconds of each other. What one machine called anomaly, the other called proof. Precision had become poetry without trying. In that moment, science was not a wall but a mirror. Every value reflected the calm of its observer. Every reading carried the shape of restraint. The universe was not hiding answers, it was showing us how to ask slower. Between frost and heat, between silence and motion, we saw the first outline of harmony. The paradox that began as conflict had dissolved into rule. Gravity held the field steady. Electrostatic pull returned dust to origin. Methane rose, fell, and waited again. Outside, the Earth rotated in quiet sympathy. Sunlight struck the dome of the atmosphere at the same low angle. Heat rose through morning mist, and for a moment the 2 worlds breathed together. This was the revelation, not discovery, but rhythm, not certainty, but return. The red planet had become a teacher of patience. Every reading that stayed consistent felt like mercy. Every pause between signals, a kind of grace. And as data streamed in one line after another, the room filled with a silence that did not need to end. Numbers lost their edges. The graph became a glow, then a breath. Each line blurred until it was no longer read but felt. The field at Jezero moved without moving. Heat lifted in waves too soft for measure. Frost folded into light. Gas drifted back toward stone, not falling, not rising, only returning. The instruments continued their rhythm, but their purpose had changed. They were not searching anymore, only listening. Data had become music made of patience. The surface shimmered like slow water, each ripple a translation of what numbers once meant. Pressure and gradient became weight and grace. A faint pulse crossed the air and vanished. No boundary remained between signal and silence. The atmosphere, the dust, the field all spoke one quiet language. It was not speech, but attention. Not motion, but memory held in balance. Light thinned as the sun rose higher. Shadows shortened and the frost withdrew into shade. The scene was complete. There was nothing to add, nothing to remove. We watched until difference disappeared. And in the calm that followed, knowledge became perception. Perception became rest. The crater cooled beneath pale light. Frost returned, thin and even. No wind crossed the rim, no signal moved through the air. Every circuit in the rover rested. What had been motion became presence. The last trace of heat lingered inside the field and faded. Jezero lay open, holding its quiet like a thought left unfinished. The planet exhaled once, then waited. Above, orbit settled into its long ellipse. No adjustment needed, no correction made. The machines drifted through their own silence, each still carrying the memory of signal. Down on the plain, shadows shortened. Light balanced evenly between stone and dust. For the first time in many rotations, nothing changed. That steadiness felt almost alive. In mission control, the graphs stopped updating. The room filled with the soft hum of idle power. A notebook closed with care. The cursor blinked and stayed still. No one reached for the keyboard. The horizon outside turned a muted gold. The day continued without waiting for confirmation. We watched the light hold its place and let time pass through it. The scene became less a picture than an understanding. Silence deepened until it was not absence but completion. The frost and the air, the light and the stone, all obeyed the same unspoken balance. Nothing asked for more than rest. We understood that stillness was not the end of motion, but its proof. Everything that had moved had found its place. Everything that had spoken had learned quiet. The planet and the observer shared one breath. The field held, and we held with it. Even silence seemed to understand. And the silence held.